This is a 1976 Kawasaki KM100. It's a pretty cool little 100cc dirt bike, but you might notice there's a couple key components missing right now, one of them being the seat. Now I have no clue where the seat for this bike is, and I assume the last person to have seen it died somewhere around 1996. But one way or another, I need a new seat. This gives me a couple options. There's several cheap reproduction seats that you can buy online, but they're all catered more towards cafe racers, and none of them really look like a vintage dirt bike seat, as you can see in this picture. Another option is going on eBay and just buying a stock seat, but that is hundreds and hundreds of dollars that I really don't feel like spending on this shitty bike. The third option is to just make myself a seat. Now, I have no experience with upholstery work, but I do own a staple gun, and this option seems cheapest, so I think I'm going to give it a shot. I can always go buy a seat later if this is a horrible failure. The first order of business is to build a seat pan, which is going to be the backbone that everything else attaches to. And to do that, I first need to measure the dimensions of these rails that the seat is going to sit on. Once I had my dimensions, I took this old piece of random scrap wood that I had laying around that honestly is probably as old as the bike, and I started drawing out what my seat pan was going to look like. Then I ran it through the bandsaw and cut out the shape. Once I had the shape cut out, I laid it on the frame and gave it an eyeball, and everything looked good. At this point, I needed something to make the rest of the seat out of, since it couldn't just be all wood. I looked around at high-density foam and vinyl sheeting, but it was all kind of pricey and difficult to buy in such small quantities. And then I found this. This is a folding gym mat that I bought on Facebook Marketplace for $30. It's basically just some layers of foam wrapped in a heavy-duty vinyl fabric. In my mind, it's a motorcycle seat that's not the correct shape. For this job, I thought it would be perfect. This mat is made up of two separate sections so it can fold, which is convenient for me because I really only needed half of it. I started by cutting the two sections apart, and then I harvested one of the sections for all of its material. Then I used the seat pan as a template, and I used it to cut out a chunk of foam in the same shape. In this clip I'm using a box cutter, which I found to be really a bad way of doing it because it leaves a bit of a mess. Later on I would learn that a serrated knife will do this way cleaner and way more efficiently. Once I had the first piece cut out, I just did it again to get a second piece, and this got me to about the correct height for a vintage dirt bike seat. It's about 4 inches thick. I then mocked it all up on the bike to get an idea of the proportions, and comparing it to a factory seat, I think I've pretty much got the gist of it here. I did do a bit of a test to see if it would look better with a third layer of foam, but it's pretty clear here that that seat is now way too high. I went back to 2 pieces of foam, and I played around with the alignment of the pieces a little bit until I ended up with this, which is what the final shape is going to look like roughly. Then I busted out the spray foam, and I glued the 2 pieces of foam together to make 1 piece of foam. Really fascinating stuff. Once the glue was semi-dry, I took a serrated knife and started trying to cut out the contours of the seat. And it's a good thing this seat doesn't have a lot of contours because this was actually harder than I thought it was going to be, and as you can see it's a little bit messy. I wouldn't blame you if you're looking at this right now thinking that it's going to end up looking terrible, but I would implore you to watch till the end because it actually turns out pretty good. Now was the part I'd been dreading. It was time to wrap the seat. I took the vinyl from the mat and I cut it into one big flat sheet, and then I just kind of started stapling. I don't know anything about upholstery, and if you're someone who does know anything about upholstery, I would suggest you probably don't watch this because it's a little bit of an ordeal. I found that the difficult thing about wrapping a seat as opposed to, say, wrapping a birthday present is that on a seat everything has to be attached to the bottom. On a birthday present you could tape on the sides, but with a seat, every fold you make has to lead to you stapling the bottom, which is kind of a tough puzzle to solve. After 20 or so minutes of just kind of folding where I thought I should fold and stapling where it felt right to staple and cutting off excess fabric, I ended up with something that I thought looked quite a bit like a motorcycle seat. You can see that not all the folds are perfect, but realistically this is as good as I, as an amateur, am capable of doing. And that's what it looks like on the bike. I think you can definitely tell that it's a homemade seat cover, but I think I could fool someone into thinking it's not a homemade seat, and I could definitely fool someone into thinking that it's not made out of old gym equipment. So, overall for $30, I'm really happy with this. Now, making a new seat isn't the only thing I did for this bike. I'm actually in the middle of a full rescue on it, where I took it all the way back down to the bare frame, and I'm building it up hopefully better than it was before. I'll have a big feature video on that coming out sometime in the next few months. I'm not quite sure when, so if you want to see more of this bike, be sure to click the subscribe button. And if you don't want to see more of this bike, I think you have bad taste, and you should reevaluate your life decisions.